This is Studio Ghibli, Japan's most revered animation facility. It was founded in 1985 by 3 people. One of them was Hayao Miyazaki, who would go on to direct gorgeously animated features which became classics. His work has attracted many animation fans around the world, including myself. Hello everyone, and welcome. My name is John Turner, and I'm so pleased you've decided to join me. I was introduced to Miyazaki way back in 1998 when I was in high school. Now at the time, I knew nothing about this man. Nothing. That is, until I stumbled upon a delightful and enchanting movie called Kiki's Delivery Service. Since then, I've become a fan of his. There are reasons why Mr. Miyazaki is considered a genius at his craft. He has a special gift of mixing imaginative visuals, compelling characters, and rich, thoughtful storytelling. Chances are you might have seen some of these films. Miyazaki's movies have also inspired directors of several animated features here in America too, from lesser-known films like Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, to more memorable Disney features such as The Great Mouse Detective, Atlantis: The Lost Empire, Mulan, and Fantasia 2000. But as much as audiences have grown to love Miyazaki's movies from Studio Ghibli, his output stretches much farther than that. Starting in the 1960s, he worked at various other Japanese animation studios. It's a fascinating chapter in the story of Miyazaki's career that is well known to hardcore anime fans, but not so much to others. So for the next hour, we're going to focus on these gems from the past in the form of tonight's panel, the early works of Hayao Miyazaki. Hayao Miyazaki was born on January 5th, 1941, in the town of Akebono-cho in Bunkyo, Tokyo. When he was in junior high school, Miyazaki's first aspiration was not to be an animator, but a comic book artist. It was an ambition shared by many teenagers in post-war Japan. You see, during this time, comic books, known in Japan as manga, were a huge deal. One aspiring talent named Osamu Tezuka, who would later become known as the godfather of Japanese animation, penned and published his first successful graphic novel series at the age of 19. Because of that, there were many who were eager to follow in Tezuka's footsteps. Miyazaki was very much influenced by Mr. Tezuka's work, as well as those of Tetsuji Fukushima and Soji Yamakawa. Back then, however, Miyazaki was not particularly skillful at drawing people, so he only drew planes, tanks, and battleships for several years. Over time, however, Miyazaki discarded much of his early work, for he believed that copying Mr. Tezuka's style was getting in the way of finding his own voice as an artist. During his 3rd year in high school, Miyazaki saw Panda and the Magic Serpent, the first Japanese animated feature to be released in color. That experience left a strong impression on Miyazaki, so much so in fact that it would inspire him to seek a career in animation instead. When he was in college, Miyazaki was a member of the Children's Literature Research Club. This group read and studied children's books and comics, including works from Europe. It was here that Miyazaki was introduced to a wide range of storytellers who were especially skilled at melding fantasy and legends in their tales. These authors included Rosemary Sutcliffe, Philippa Pierce, Eleanor Farjeon, and Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, all of who served in refining his views on storytelling and character development. But Miyazaki still had quite a lot to learn before becoming one of Japan's greatest, if not the greatest, animation director of all time. After graduating college in 1963, the now 22-year-old Hayao Miyazaki would be hired by the company who produced Panda and the Magic Serpent, Toei Doga. Toei is one of the oldest animation studios in Japan, founded in 1948. Over the years, Toei has created countless projects for film and television. Miyazaki's first assignment at Toei was to work on 2 productions, a theatrical feature, Doggy March, and a television series known as Wolf Boy Ken. On both projects, Miyazaki served as an in-between artist. What's an in-between artist? Well, to answer that question, let's take a look at this drawing by Disney animator Aaron Blaise. This is the start sequence for a character movement in a drawing. Now let's look at this one. This is the end position. What's missing are the drawings that lead up to it. That's the job of an in-betweener, to provide those illustrations. Most of the time, it's sketching the same picture over and over again, with slight variations to make the movement look natural. As you can tell, in-between animation is a rather time-consuming process, and for Miyazaki, it proved to be very, very tedious. As a matter of fact, he came very close to quitting out of frustration. Fortunately, he didn't. What changed his mind? A special screening of The Snow Queen, a 1957 animated feature based on Hans Christian Andersen's famous fairy tale. This film, produced by the Russian animation studio Soyuz Multfilm, was notable for some spectacular animation techniques depicting the swirling of snow or waves crashing at the Ice Palace. As with Panda and the Magic Serpent, Miyazaki was very much inspired by this film, especially those techniques and its emotionally engaging story. He admits that had he not seen this film, I honestly doubt that I would have continued working as an animator. Miyazaki would soon lend his services to another feature from Toei, Gulliver's Space Travels, released in 1965. This movie is based on Jonathan Swift's legendary novel, with numerous embellishments and twists. Here, Gulliver is portrayed as an old scientist who has built a rocket ship. Accompanied by a homeless boy named Ted, as well as a crow, a dog, and a living toy soldier, all of who can talk, incidentally, Gulliver sets off on a journey across the Milky Way. Eventually, our heroes discover the planet of Blue Hope, inhabited by strange doll-like creatures who are under attack by a clan of deadly robots. The overall tone of Gulliver's Space Travels is reminiscent of a Disney feature, what with its cuddly characters, slapstick action, and sprightly musical numbers. But the film also features some lively and sometimes bizarre set pieces, such as a brief visit to an amusement park, a thrilling chase through an asteroid field, and even experiences with zero gravity. At one point, our heroes become trapped in a reverse time warp, where they literally revert to younger versions of themselves. Some of the songs in the film also involve a lot of abstract imagery as well.
地球の言葉は123何でも数えるワン、ツー、時計は20時間 んで
Gulliver's Space Travels also bears the distinction of being one of the earliest Japanese animated features to receive a theatrical release in America. It was Toei's intention to market this movie to a wider international audience. Retitled Gulliver's Travels Beyond the Moon for America, the film failed to make an impression with either critics or audiences during its brief theatrical issue in 1966. It would be 12 years, yes, 12 years, until another Japanese animated feature would reach the big screen in America. It's also a movie in which Miyazaki would show his gift at storytelling. While still mostly working as an in-betweener on Gulliver's Space Travels, Miyazaki helped conceive the ending, animating most of its scenes himself. The film's conclusion reveals the citizens of Blue Hope to have been human beings under a spell. This provided the film with a deeper meaning than that of the original script. Miyazaki's efforts impressed the studio, and soon he would graduate to key animator, contributing to other TV series such as Samurai Kid, Hustle Punch, Sally the Witch, Moomin, and Akko's Secret. As it turned out, however, this would only be the beginning of great things to come for this aspiring artist. Around this time, Miyazaki would meet the man who was to become his lifelong partner, Isao Takahata, who was the director for both Wolf Boy Ken and Doggy March. It wouldn't be long until Takahata was commissioned to direct an all-new feature for Toei. This project would be a much more ambitious and grander effort than anything the studio had done before. The end result was The Great Adventures of Horus, Prince of the Sun, released in 1968. Set in a Scandinavian region, the film begins with young Horus battling an angry pack of silver wolves. In the process, he accidentally awakens a massive stone giant, which results in his attackers fleeing. Horus then pulls out an ancient sword from its shoulder. The giant tells him that this is no ordinary sword.
It's a mighty special sword, the Sword of the Sun. When you have learned how to use it, I, Rakor, will come to see it for myself. At that moment, you will be called Prince of the Sun.
Shortly after Horus returns home in triumph, his dying father informs him he must return to the land where he was born, where his home village was once ravaged by the evil Ice Lord Grunwald. Accompanied by his only friend, a bear named Koro, Horus arrives at a fishing village, which is being terrorized by a menacing pike. He also meets Hilda, a girl his age with a golden voice.
Once upon a time, God said to the world, who will take this child to heart and love her as his own?
But she's not as innocent as she appears to be. In fact, she turns out to be Grunwald's sister and has been ordered to kill Horus by any means, a task complicated by her growing feelings for him. Horus, Prince of the Sun was quite a departure for a Toei animated production. For one thing, it cost a lot more money than the average Japanese animated feature at the time. It also had a longer production cycle than usual. You see, while most theatrical features at Toei back then were made during a period of 9 to 10 months, Horus took 3 years to complete. 3 years! The reason? Both Mr. Takahata and animation director Yasuo Otsuka wanted to provide a more realistic, expressive, and complex tone that couldn't be achieved in television animation. In so doing, the film would set a new standard for Japanese animation. Furthermore, Takahata invited everyone involved on the project to contribute ideas to the story, regardless of their status, a move which, at the time, was very daring. Miyazaki was one of the most active participants. Much of the film's style and script are greatly influenced by him. Unfortunately, 3 things happened during the production of Horus. 1, Toei Animation cut off funding, for they felt that the team was spending too much money to achieve their vision. This resulted with several scenes never being fully animated. Instead, the staff would have to use still drawings for 2 attack scenes, as you see here. 2, in spite of receiving unanimous acclaim from both critics and audiences, Toei provided Horus with a brief theatrical release, 10 days total. As such, the movie flopped at the box office. The 3rd and most unfortunate blow added insult to injury. Takahata was demoted. As such, he never directed another feature for Toei. But Horus Prince of the Sun has endured the test of time and is now considered an early anime classic. The film was brought to America with a different name, Little Norse Prince, and was shown on television. Today, the film is available on DVD and Blu-ray from the folks at Discotheque Media. Their release includes a commentary track by Mike Jewell, who provides a lot more fascinating anecdotes behind this film. If you ever get a chance to view Horus Prince of the Sun, I would highly recommend doing so. Not only is it an interesting and fascinating achievement in Miyazaki's career, it also provides subtle hints of the sort of stories and themes the animator would tackle when he became famous. In spite of the failure of Horus, Miyazaki would continue working on projects for Toei as a key animator. The year 1969 saw the release of 2 such features. The first was The Wonderful World of Puss in Boots, a lively, humorous retelling of the classic fairy tale. Directed by Kimio Yabuki, the film, while faithful to the original for the most part, provides interesting twists of its own. The hero, Pero, is a good-hearted cat musketeer on the run from 3 bumbling cat bandits. His crime? Saving a mouse's life. Eventually, Pero meets Pierre, a poor miller's son who is abused by his greedy brothers. The 2 form a friendship, and with a bit of tall tale telling, Pero manages to pass Pierre off as the rich and generous Prince Carabas in order for him to woo the fair but lonely Princess Rosa. But their plan is spoiled by the evil Lucifer, who wants the princess for himself. He captures Rosa and takes her to his foreboding castle. Our heroes attempt a rescue mission, with Pero, as per the fairy tale, convincing the shape-shifting ogre to show off his talents.
I'm sure the princess would love to see you turn into a mouse, if you can.
Princess, you just watch this.
But the result doesn't turn out like the fairy tale. In a surprise twist, Lucifer catches on to Pero's trick, changes back to his former self, and decides to punish the 2 heroes. At one point, he even becomes a fearsome 3-headed dragon. And I thought Maleficent's dragon was scary. Later, Lucifer accidentally loses his skull pendant, which is not only his source of power, but his life as well. The last 20 minutes of the film are a fast-paced, edge-of-your-seat chase around the castle, as Pierre, Pero, and Rosa struggle to keep the pendant away from the enraged ogre.
Give me that skull!
Their only hope is to expose the pendant to morning sunlight, which will vanquish the evil villain forever. Throughout the story, Pero and Pierre are aided by a family of mice with squeaky footsteps. No, seriously, listen. Cute though they may be, these mice are also quite clever. In fact, these loyal characters prove to be a valuable assistance, whether they are stealing clothes for Pierre, providing appropriate music for entourages, or romantic evenings, and especially at the thrilling finale. In this film, Miyazaki provided both key animation and contributed numerous ideas for the film's story. In fact, it is believed that the climax of this movie influenced that of his first feature, The Castle of Cagliostro, as these following clips indicate. Puss in Boots was a huge box office hit for Toei, so much so in fact that 2 sequels were produced. Miyazaki was not involved in either of them because they were made after he left Toei. Adding to the movie's success, Pero would become Toei's official mascot, just like Mickey Mouse for Walt Disney, Bugs Bunny for Warner Brothers, and of course, Miyazaki's own Totoro for Studio Ghibli. The film was also brought to America and broadcast on television sometime after its Japanese premiere. The Wonderful World of Puss in Boots did receive releases on video and later on DVD, but as of now, it is out of print. Hopefully, this film will one day make a reappearance. It's a terrific, funny, and charming reimagining of a classic story as you've never seen it before. To this day, Japanese audiences still adore it. Not long after Puss in Boots, Toei would release in the summer of that same year, The Flying Phantom Ship. This feature tells the story of a boy named Hayato, who tragically loses his parents after a massive and dangerous robot attacks his town. The robot claims to be a messenger from a mysterious flying ship. In his quest to avenge his parents' deaths, Hayato soon finds himself on an even bigger adventure when he discovers that things are not what they seem. The Flying Phantom Ship borrows a lot of elements from various genres for its plot: horror, science fiction, mystery, adventure, and yes, even Godzilla flicks. It also has shades of Scooby-Doo. In fact, one of its characters is an easily frightened hound who was a dead ringer for Hanna-Barbera's famous canine. Yet in spite of all this, the Flying Phantom Ship manages to deliver some surprisingly thoughtful messages, including a warning about the dangers of consumerism. A subplot in the movie is dedicated to a popular drink called Boa Juice, sold by the Kuroshio Corporation. Many characters in this movie are addicted to this drink, but it turns out to be gradually poisonous, as this scene demonstrates. Once again, Miyazaki provided key animation to this film, namely for the giant robot itself. He also suggested and animated a sequence in which military tanks attack the giant robot in town, in front of innocent civilians. The Flying Phantom Ship has sadly never seen any release in America, but interestingly, it was one of the first Japanese animated features to be dubbed into Russian. 2 years later, Toei would release another pair of animated features. The first of these was Animal Treasure Island, loosely adapted from Robert Louis Stevenson's classic novel. Young hero Jim Hawkins is portrayed as a human, but much of the rest of the cast are animals. Villainous Long John Silver in particular is portrayed as a nasty-looking pig. Miyazaki whose primary job was key animator on this film, yet again, is very fond of pigs and has found opportunities to incorporate these animals into many of his films. Aside from being lighthearted, fast-paced, and slapstick throughout, Animal Treasure Island also adds two new characters, a girl named Kathy, who, like Jim, is human. In fact, she turns out to be the granddaughter of Captain Flint, whose treasure is the searched-for object in this tale. The only other human in the story is a toddler, Babu, who provides comic relief and tags along with Jim on his adventure, whether he likes it or not. The film also features an ending sequence in which a treasure is revealed at the bottom of a lake. This same scene would also serve as an inspiration for the Castle of Cagliostro's resolution. Animal Treasure Island, like Puss in Boots and Horus, was broadcast on American television and briefly released to DVD, but now the film is out of print. This movie's director, Hiroshi Ikeda, would go on to handle the second Toei feature released that year, Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, which is yet another comical take on a classic story. This movie reimagines the title character of the famous Arabian Nights tale as a greedy, ruthless sultan, the 33rd descendant of Alibaba himself. Having spent every last cent of Alibaba's treasure, the now destitute sultan discovers a magic lamp inside his treasure vault, housing a wish-granting genie who happens to be afraid of cats. Just bear with me, okay? So much so, in fact, that he refuses to grant wishes for the wicked sultan until all the cats around the kingdom are gone. The sultan rounds up a search party to capture most of the cats, but 38 of them escape and join forces with Al-Haq, a poor boy who happens to be a descendant of the leader of the legendary 40 Thieves. With the help of these cats, as well as one mouse, Al-Haq leads an assault to steal back what was rightfully his. In short, this bizarre, raucous tale is the reverse of the original story, with an aesthetic style that is very much in the veins of what you would expect from a Dr. Seuss book. The film is 55 minutes of unhinged, cartoonish gags, silliness, and over-the-top action. At one point, we see a recounting of the famous Alibaba tale portrayed with shadow puppets, which is arguably the most compelling scene. Otherwise, this movie is goofy throughout, even the opening credits. As usual, Miyazaki was key animator on this production, and some fans assume that the film's wild climax stems from Miyazaki's imagination alone. Alibaba and the 40 Thieves was brought to America on video, renamed Alibaba's Revenge, rather bizarrely. As of today, however, the movie is out of print, and no company has picked up the rights for distribution. It has not even been issued on DVD as of now. Shortly after the release of those two films, Miyazaki would leave Toei Animation in search of other ventures. Isao Takahata left too. Miyazaki and Takahata would soon find work at A Production Studios. Yes, that's the name of the studio in English, believe it or not. The duo would soon be commissioned to rescue a series which had stumbled out of the starting gate, Lupin III. The studio had been commissioned by Tokyo Movie Shinsha to produce this series. Based on Monkey Punch's classic comic books, the show had been poorly received on Japanese television. The director, Masaki Osumi, was requested to make changes in order to broaden the show's appeal. When he refused, he was jettisoned, and soon Miyazaki and Takahata would take his place. Together, the two gave the series a significant overhaul, turning what was once a cynical, raunchy, edgy show into a fast-paced, humorous one. Despite their efforts, however, ratings barely improved, and the show was cancelled before even finishing its 26-episode run, stopping at 23. That said, the series did eventually achieve popularity through subsequent reruns. Shortly after, Miyazaki would get an opportunity to write his first screenplay for a short featurette directed by Takahata. Panda Go Panda, released in 1972. Its storyline is about a cheerful little girl named Mimiko, whose grandmother has gone on a trip, leaving her alone. She lives in a house somewhere in a bamboo forest. One day, she discovers a baby panda named Panny on her windowsill and instantly befriends it. As she takes the little fellow into her house, along comes Papa Panda.
I thought I'd come inside your pretty red-roofed house to ask you if my little panda son was here.
So you're little panda's papa. Well, come on in.
In no time, all three become very close and live like a family. They eat together, sleep together, play together, and of course, get into trouble together. That's the synopsis of this lighthearted feature. In fact, it could very well be seen as a prototype for a later movie of Miyazaki's, My Neighbor Totoro. This is evident in the design of its characters. With his big round eyes and wide toothy grin, Papa Panda is easily reminiscent of Miyazaki's now famous creation. And little Mimiko is pretty much a dead ringer for Mei in My Neighbor Totoro as well. Admittedly, this featurette lacks the depth and emotional undertow of the latter feature, but it is an interesting entry in Miyazaki's output. Panda Go Panda was a huge hit in Japan, and soon a second featurette was made, The Circus in the Rain. This sequel introduces a new character, a tiger named Tiny, and even features an extensive finale involving a runaway train, as well as a near collision, narrowly averted by Papa Panda. Both of these films were released on DVD in America by Pioneer, but were since reissued on Blu-ray by Discotheque Media. Unfortunately, both releases are currently out of print, and it remains to be seen if either movie will ever be brought back into the spotlight. Sometime after completing these two films, Miyazaki and Takahata both moved on from A Production and joined another company, Nippon Animation. Here, both men would soon find themselves working on a long-running series called World Masterpiece Theater, which involved adaptations of classic literature. These retellings usually lasted as long as a full season. The first of these projects Miyazaki and Takahata would work on was Heidi, Girl of the Alps. Broadcast on Japanese television in 1974, it was a huge success, running for 52 episodes from January 6th to December 29th. In fact, it's still widely loved in Japan. Following this, Miyazaki and Takahata would handle other adaptations of classic books for World Masterpiece Theater, including A Dog of Flanders, 3,000 Miles in Search of Mother, Rascal the Raccoon, and Anne of Green Gables. Sadly, few, if any, of these adaptations have crossed over to America. Heidi was released on video in America as a heavily condensed edit of the TV series in 1979, but this version is no longer available. The series, despite receiving an English dub, likewise, has never been issued on physical media in America. Anne of Green Gables, on the other hand, was dubbed into English for broadcast on television, but now it can only be found on YouTube. A Dog of Flanders, 3,000 Miles, and Rascal the Raccoon, on the other hand, never made it. At this point, we've heard much about what Miyazaki worked on as an animator and as a writer. While it is true that his first animated movie was released in 1979, it wasn't Miyazaki's debut as a director. That honor belongs to a series broadcast in Japan in 1978, Future Boy Conan. As with World Masterpiece Theater, it was produced by Nippon Animation. This charming, engaging serial introduces concepts that Miyazaki would tackle in subsequent projects of his. Set in a post-apocalyptic world, the show tells the story of Conan, a plucky, adventurous lad who lives with his grandfather on Remnant Island. He's only 11 years old and rather small, but he is blessed with many abilities. He is strong, he can run really fast, swim skillfully, and even hold his breath for more than 3 minutes. One day, a girl named Lana washes ashore on Remnant Island. The two quickly become friends, but soon she is captured by soldiers from Industria, a dangerous region ruled by a villain called Lepka. Forced to say goodbye to his grandfather, Conan abandons the only home he has ever known and sets off on a rescue mission, meeting several other characters on the way, including a wild boy named Jimsy, the bumbling Captain Dice, an enemy-turned-ally, Monsling, and the mysterious but wise Dr. Lau. This show is based on a science fiction novel, The Incredible Tide, written by Alexander Keane. It's a rather dark, depressing story, but Miyazaki had no intention of making his series such a downer. He personally believed that Mr. Key's book reflected his own fears and insecurities. It was his desire to make this story optimistic and appealing to children. He states, "Even if someone's lost all hope for the future, I think it is incredibly stupid to go around stressing this to children. Emphasize it to adults if you have to, but there's no need to do so to children. It would be better to simply not say anything at all." Ironically, it was probably because of Miyazaki's lighthearted approach that Future Boy Conan had a tough time crossing the seas. Despite being successful in Japan, Alexander Keane detested Miyazaki's show. So much so, in fact, he ordered his estate to never allow Future Boy Conan to come to America. Streamline Pictures once attempted to do so in the early 1990s, but the Key estate issued a cease and desist order, putting a halt to such plans. Future Boy Conan has, however, been brought to other countries, particularly the Arab world, where it remains popular today. As of now, Future Boy Conan is still not available in America, which is absolutely unfortunate, because it deserves to be. As someone who has seen every episode of the show while it was on YouTube, I can assure you it's a fantastic, consistently entertaining series, filled with just the right amount of heart, adventure, humor, and warmth, qualities you would expect from a Miyazaki movie. It's also rich with messages about the importance of respecting nature, the responsibility of power, and the dangers of technology, especially if used by the wrong hands. This is a show that can be enjoyed by viewers of any age. It's my hope that one day this show will reach our shores too. Miyazaki would later come to recycle elements of this story in 2 other features of his, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, and especially Castle in the Sky, which in many ways is a dead ringer for Conan. Interestingly too, another animation studio, Gainax, would put their own spin on the tale with their popular anime series, Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, which itself was based on a similar concept Miyazaki pitched to a television network. A year after the release of Future Boy Conan, Miyazaki would once again change studios. This time, he joined Telecom Animation Film, a subsidiary of Tokyo Movie Shinsha. It was here that he would direct The Castle of Cagliostro, which, as mentioned earlier, was his first movie. Following this, he also helmed 2 episodes for the 4th season of Lupin's second television series, Albatross Wings of Death, and Farewell Beloved Lupin, the show's conclusion. Both episodes would not only go on to become highly acclaimed, but would feature visual concepts that Miyazaki would later use in subsequent movies of his. Miyazaki's next and final television series would begin production shortly after finishing work on those escapades of Lupin. Sherlock Hound, a joint project by Tokyo Movie Shinsha and Italian network RAI, portrays Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's famous detective, as well as his allies and enemies, as dogs. But there are some significant differences. Sherlock, for instance, is portrayed as a much younger and more active participant than his literary counterpart, and Mrs. Hudson is reimagined as a 19-year-old widow who, like most Miyazaki heroines, gets to participate in the action. There's even a little bit of Jules Verne-style technology woven into the story, providing Sherlock Hound with a tilt toward 19th century science fiction territory. The end result is a lively, action-packed serial featuring several trademarks of Miyazaki: car chases, flying scenes, strong female characters, former villains turning allies, the list goes on and on. In addition to providing scripts for several episodes, Miyazaki also directed 6 of them. But just as production was underway, fate intervened. Like future Boy Conan, Miyazaki would face opposition from the author of the original story. In this case, it was in the form of a copyright dispute with the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle estate. Consequently, all work on the show had to be stopped. Fortunately, this setback would have a happier resolution than future Boy Conan. Around the same time, Miyazaki was at work on a different project that would garner widespread recognition with Japanese audiences: Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which he began first as a graphic novel series, and then it was made into a highly acclaimed movie. It was decided to pair 2 completed episodes of Sherlock Hound, The Blue Carbuncle, and Treasure Under the Sea, to be shown as a package feature alongside Nausicaa. The gamble paid off. Audiences responded with enthusiasm to both episodes, as well as the movie, and eventually, the copyright dispute was resolved. As a result, production resumed on Sherlock Hound, and the show would finally be broadcast on Japanese television in November of 1984. By this time, however, Miyazaki was no longer working on the show, so a new team of animators would have to step in. Sherlock Hound was dubbed into English roughly around the same time the show was being produced, and would be broadcast on HBO in late 1983. The English script was provided by Emmy-nominated writer John Semper Jr., who would go on, many years later, to work on the Disney-produced dubs for Kiki's Delivery Service and Castle in the Sky. An avid fan of Miyazaki himself, Semper takes pride in the work he has done for this legendary animator, and rightly so. Thankfully, his efforts for Sherlock Hound are preserved by the folks at Discotheque Media, who have issued this show on DVD. I highly recommend checking it out if you can. Following the release of Sherlock Hound, Miyazaki, along with Takahata and producer Toshio Suzuki, would form Studio Ghibli, and the rest is history. For all that Miyazaki was able to accomplish, there have been cases where some projects he was involved with either never got off the ground or were abandoned out of frustration. Tokyo Movie Shinsha's ambitious and costly animated production, Little Nemo: Adventures in Slumberland, was one such example of the latter. Based on Winsor McCoy's comic book, this movie follows the title character who goes on a wild adventure to a mythical kingdom in his sleep. Naturally, a synopsis like this would make one assume that the film was a dream come true to make. In reality, however, the film's production period was a nightmare, with many artists initially being appointed to work on the project only to be discharged or quit. Miyazaki and Takahata were among them. Their experience of working on this film was not pleasant. In fact, Miyazaki considers his involvement on this film the worst experience he has ever been through. He was simply not a fan of creating an animated feature where everything is a dream. Takahata shared Miyazaki's sentiments, believing that the film should depict Nemo's growth as a boy. But their suggestions were turned down. Eventually, Miyazaki and Takahata both dropped out of the project. Perhaps their decision was for the better, because the final version of Little Nemo turned out to be a predictable, harmless, kid-friendly feature. It was criticized for emulating Disney's style of filmmaking, what with its cuddly characters, musical numbers, and formulaic story. Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland cost $35 million to make, and it made less than a third of that at the box office. That same year, Miyazaki's own Kiki's Delivery Service was released theatrically. And can you guess which was the more successful of the two? That's right, it was Kiki, not Little Nemo, that turned out to be the bigger hit, with a budget of approximately $6 million and earned more than 4 times its cost. Today, Kiki is regarded as a classic, while Little Nemo is less so. Although the film did manage to have a healthy afterlife on video, and today has a cult following. But there is something else that came out of the turmoil Miyazaki went through with Little Nemo, and that is this pilot video, which provides a different concept of what could have been. This pilot was made by Miyazaki's colleague, Yoshifumi Kondo, who stayed on to work on the project. Eventually, he too left the production. But fans can access this fascinating short as an extra on Discotek Media's Blu-ray release of this film. Another project of Miyazaki's that ultimately went nowhere was a television series based on Astrid Lindgren's Pippi Longstocking. Miyazaki and Takahata both expressed interest on producing the show for the World Masterpiece Theater lineup. Miyazaki even paid a visit to the author's home in Sweden to ask for permission. But Lindgren turned Miyazaki down, and as such, this series never saw the light of day. All that remains of the project are these concept art sketches. On the flip side, Miyazaki's experience on that trip proved to be a valuable asset, for when production began on Kiki's Delivery Service, he sent his staff to Sweden on a research trip, which contributed handsomely to the movie's beautifully realized European setting. Hayao Miyazaki has come a long way, not only as an animator and director, but also in terms of achieving recognition in his home country of Japan. Today, his movies, as mentioned, are adored by millions of viewers around the world, and appreciation for his work is increasing, including in the United States. Usually when Miyazaki finishes a project, he announces retirement, only to go back on his word and produce another feature. This has occurred numerous times in his career. It happened after Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Ponyo, and what was supposed to be his final feature, The Wind Rises. As it turns out, however, Miyazaki is currently working on a new movie, How Do You Live? As of now, the film is still in production and has yet to have a release date. But as long as Miyazaki lives, you can bet that he will continue to take audiences on fascinating, dazzling journeys into imaginative settings with stories that inspire, characters who leave impressions, and more importantly, works of art that will stand the test of time. Incidentally, Miyazaki has recently turned 80, and what better way to celebrate than holding this panel? It is unclear what will happen to Studio Ghibli when the animator puts down his pen for the last time, but even if that day comes, his work will always live on. On a personal note, this is a panel I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm very delighted to have shared this with you all tonight. I hope you enjoyed it and that I've expanded your insights, whether you are familiar with this legendary director or not. More importantly, I hope I've encouraged you to check out more of his movies and other works. All it takes is just one view to become a fan of his. Just one. That is how appealing his work is. I have more panels coming up, and they'll premiere here on Virtual Panel Theater. Keep your eye open for them. And I hope to present some of these panels in person at conventions when they start again. Until then, however, this is John Turner saying, thanks for watching, everybody. Stay healthy, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.